Give me your life stories, because that's what like empowered me at one point, and it still does. People that are like internationally who can't even be out, and they're telling me that they like watch my videos and that they're empowered by them. And I'm shocked whenever I go through like just my requests and my messages and just see the people who have literally said that they came out because of my account.
Welcome to Create for Change, where we're gathering folks, particularly creative activists, to think about the power of storytelling in social impact. Today, I'm joined by Kymon Warman, a content creator and activist. All right, Kymon, to kick things off, I'm curious of how would you describe who you are and what your work entails?
I'm a content creator, a little bit of an activist student, and honestly just a queer person that's documenting my life in a sense. And I think that comes across in my TikTok and in my videos. I just make videos documenting me, and I think as I continue to progress and just experience new things, I also make some educational videos talking about those experiences.
All right, so take me through the origin story. How did we get here?
Okay, yeah, it's a little bit of a complex story, but I came out as most queer people do. And before I came out, I was closeted, lived in Kansas City, Missouri, in a small suburb of Kansas City, Missouri. Grew up in an all-white school, was the product of an interracial relationship. My parents are interracial. And just grew up always thinking about myself and my identity and my blackness and my queerness. So always just grew up thinking very introspectively about myself. And I think that motivated me to educate myself and get involved in activism. And oddly enough, I was on TikTok, and there was this trend where people were making closeted accounts on TikTok where they wouldn't be showing their face, but they would talk about their struggles, and they would talk about, wanting to come out. And I think I found a lot of inspiration in that. And I was like, you know what, like, screw it, I'm going to do it myself. But I was like, I'm just going to show my face and block every single person that I know and hope that no one ever sees it. So I made a TikTok, probably gained my first like 20 to 30K followers through that. Ended up, like I practically anticipated, that was how I was kind of outed, I guess. So ended up coming out to my family and anyone else that followed that TikTok. And I think that was just the moment where I realized that there was never a time in my life where I was confident in coming out, except whenever I had that community, wherever I had my TikTok. And I realized the power of social media and how empowering it was for me. And I think going forward after that, I just knew I wanted to use my social media as something to empower other people. So I started creating videos, documenting my life, making more educational videos, just my thoughts about things. And that's how it started.
I love that. Yeah, so take me through a little bit around the documentation process here. So I think you're talking about, an interesting approach that you're taking in your content creation journey, which is really just you're documenting your life as it is, and you just happen to have these little puzzle pieces. So take me through that approach versus I think what other folks may be doing, which is like, I need to make content in this moment. I think you're taking like a documentation approach. So talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah, I think putting just my life as the priority and just living and experiencing creates the most authentic content. And I think if people resonate with my page, it's because of that. I don't feel the need to go out of my way, and create moments for the content. I just let the moments happen and then highlight those through my TikTok. So for my page, I think I take a very relaxed approach. I'm not posting every single day, which I'm sure some like social media strategists would be advising against. So I've had a slow progression of building my page just because I'm not doing it. But whenever I look back at my TikTok, I feel very happy with like what's out there, because it isn't just watered down by me just trying to, put out content. I definitely do just let those moments happen. And I think for me recently, that's talking about, just me and my relationship and me navigating things coming out to my family and how that journey has been for me. And just, documenting some of those more intimate moments in life and letting people in on those. And hopefully, they can take that and it can guide them through their own journeys, or at least they can just see some representation of the fact that they're not alone. And I think that's where I want the value from my page to be centered in. Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, I want to go back to community, and I want to go to your family. So I'll go family
Okay.
first.
Yeah.
Is like,
Go for it.
does it? I'm curious on the content you're doing. Has that been helpful in starting conversations with your family? Is your family like part of your audience, a community? I'm kind of assuming they maybe accidentally or purposely see, but I'm curious
Yeah.
if content has been a way for you to actually open up, kind of in your own family.
Yeah, I think it definitely was. Like I said, when I thought about coming out when I was young and before TikTok, I just never could even envision the conversation with my parents. I couldn't envision a conversation with my peers or my friends. And it wasn't until I got on TikTok and saw other queer people of color going through the same thing as me that it finally clicked. And I was like, no, other people are doing this in my same position, in worse positions. I can do this as well. So I honestly don't think that I'd be where I am in my personal journey if it wasn't for social media. And social media is constantly empowering me. And I always think of, my TikTok as such a mutual relationship because I'm benefiting so much in terms of just growing myself by seeing comments of people that are inspired by my story or advice from older queer people, just telling me how I can navigate, this journey a little bit easier. So I definitely think that, social media is powering me in the same way that I'm powering my account. It's
Yeah.
kind of what came first, the chicken or the egg.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about building an intentional community versus just building an audience. I think that
Yeah.
there's a distinction there. So I'm curious, as you think about who your community is, you're quite large, so I know there isn't one way to define it, but as you're sometimes talking into this kind of void, on your phone, like how would you define who your community is?
That's a good question. And I think it's constantly, changing honestly by where I am in my journey. I know for a while I moved to Chicago and it really was just the Chicago demographic of people was my audience. There's certain times whenever I talk more educationally and I think that resonates a lot with the older queer audience, which is amazing to see because it's so hard to come across older queer people currently. So like that's a really big demographic for me. I think my intended demographic when starting my TikTok was to target like queer youth, just because I do know that there's a lot of, mental health risks that come with being, a queer person of color specifically. And I think I always intended to try to reach them. Just because they are the most vulnerable. And I think that my messaging will be most impactful towards them. But I couldn't even confine, my audience to one thing or another because it is just so expansive and it's constantly changing.
So I'm curious, as you think about some of your content, is there a piece of content that you kind of is memorable for whatever reason, whether it's the comments, whether it's kind of the engagement or conversation it started?
Yeah. I think there's been several moments maybe in documenting my life, such as my relationship with my family is something that I've got a little bit of criticism about just because I have understood that, as a queer person of color, there are so many just stressors in our life. There's constantly, weight on our shoulders. And I think allowing what I do to empower me and constantly being in like an activism space or an education space and wanting to be a part of those things without letting them run me down, I have to take care of those other stressors in my life and make sure that I'm not overworking myself. And something that I felt a lot of weight by was the fact that my relationship with my family wasn't where I wanted it to be. And it's so stereotypical that it's just, coming out, the distance in the relationship, the awkward conversations, all of those things, kind of contributed to the distance that I had between me and my parents and my siblings and things and such. So for me, I took a very forgiving approach with them that, hey, they're just learning and, we're going through this journey together, and let me, be open and not as harsh by the things or take offense to maybe some of the things that they say because they are learning.
When you see your parents as layered people, you see victims of religious brainwashing and victims of cultural conditioning. We can also start to acknowledge that our parents were probably never taught unconditional love and acceptance by their parents. Think about the fact that half of our homophobic parents would be so much more joyful and full of personality and experiences if they weren't also affected by the hold that gender roles and homophobia has even on them. When you start to see homophobia through that lens, all of a sudden the slurs, the microaggressions, and the homophobia in general doesn't have the power it used to.
A lot of people who have had bad experiences, traumatic experiences, or like unsafe experiences don't necessarily resonate with the ability to be able to look at your parents and be like, well, they're still, learning. Like, let me take it easy on them. Let me not take that personally. I think that was hard for some people to hear. Also, just me being in an interracial relationship, like I'm advocating for not only queer people, but I'm advocating for, equality and freedom for all Black people. And I think the freedom to be the type of Black person that you want to be is a big message to me. I don't think that we can be constricted into, just one big monolith. And I think that ultimately will hurt us. But that is something that I've even, experienced some criticism about myself. But outside of that, not a whole lot of criticism, or at least maybe I don't see it as criticism. I see a lot of conversation, which I always appreciate, I take a approach whenever I'm making my videos to be very sensitive about the groups that I'm talking about, to be sensitive about the different perspectives, even within the queer community, whether it's being gay, bi, trans, everyone offers something different. And I think reaching out to my friends of those different demographics helps me to maybe avoid a little bit of that confrontation that you might see. Just understanding that, I'm on a journey. I think it kind of takes the pressure off of if I do mess up, or if there is criticism or backlash, it's like, well, I'm learning too. And thank you guys for teaching me, So yeah, honestly, that's what I would say about criticism and, memorable moments, or at least things that I can remember being a response to what I've posted.
I'm curious if there's been a moment where you're like, oh, I shouldn't have shared that, or have been like a questioning if you should share something, or maybe you felt like you overshared. Has there been a moment like that?
Yeah, so I would say that was on my first TikTok account of coming out. I feel like I did share a lot of intimate moments just about me and my family, with that account being something that I intended to be private. And I think whenever you're like, seeing your parents look at your videos, you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have shared that. And just learning that lesson pretty young for me, I think has helped me navigating feeling just so exposed. It's a weird thing sometimes, and having just all of that information out there, I think is kind of a constant battle for me, just being a content creator. But I'm still taking that lens of this is just my journey, and I'm just documenting that. And I think with the people around me and the experiences that I am documenting, I think there's a little bit more leniency, because it is kind of, I guess, fake to only share the good moments and not to share the bad, because that's a very real part of everyone's experience and everyone's journey. So I don't try to stray away from, sharing intimate moments or sharing bad moments. I think those are valuable, but it's really about finding what works for you as a creator.
Is there anything you would have liked to have known when you first got started in creative activism, so to speak?
I think the most obvious one for me was probably just money, and understanding that this is something that, you're pouring your heart and your soul into, and you really are taking it. I think there's a lot of people that are, social media users, and then there's content creators. And I think whenever you take that mindset and you decide that, no, I'm going to be a content creator, there's so much energy that goes into that. And I think a lot of people feel as if they can't be, whether it be compensated, or that it shouldn't be acknowledged, or that you shouldn't be, still proud of that work, even if it's not getting views, or if it's not, you don't have your first 100K. I don't even have my first 100K. And I think, a lot of people have different benchmarks for what constitutes a content creator. And I think my advice would be everyone has their own journey, and the work that you're doing right now is it's not less valuable than the work that you're going to do, or the work that you're going to have whenever you have 100K or 1 million, whatever it might be. The work that you're doing right now is valuable. Take it seriously. And I think looking back, something that I'm proud of is just the fact that I always took my time with my TikToks. I don't go on my profile and feel very antsy or cringe looking back, just because I know that I took my time. There was no pressure to put out anything that doesn't feel authentically me.
Yeah, so let's go into talking about the process and what a content creator really entails. So I think there can often be misconceptions around like what that means. And I think some folks, it depends on your style. You might be one of the straight to camera girlies and you just like, it's a little shaky and you're in your car, and then there's folks, most of your TikToks are like their research, you're taking time. So I'm curious if you can get us into the process of creating a video.
Yeah, I think for me, it's very like nuanced, and it's obviously over time been created for me. But I completely research and I script write, and kind of going into what we were talking about earlier about just kind of talking about you want to be sensitive. I think part of being in the creative advocacy activism space is that you almost do have a responsibility and liability that when people see your videos, you should be speaking, truth, and you should be speaking stuff that, you're not going to go back and double check and it's inaccurate information. So there's a little bit of a liability for you to have those things right. And I don't think there's any shame. For me as a content creator, I script write, I research, I take, honestly, if you looked at my notes app right now, I have script ideas for days. Mm-hmm. And I sit on them, I think about them, I wait for an experience maybe to match up, or a conversation with someone else that can help me develop those scripts and those ideas. So yeah, just this constantly evolving process, but I'm very intentional about taking time, before I put out that product, because I think I am maybe a little bit afraid of, the backlash, or me not giving information that's correct or sensitive or holistically thought out. But if we want to talk specifically about like a video for me, if I could like generalize it all at once, it would be having an experience of some sort. It could literally be watching a movie and I'm like, oh, this just triggered like an idea for me, and I'll write it down in my notes app. And I found that I can sit down and look at those ideas, and like for hours nothing will come to mind, and I just like come to this blank space. So I've just got to the point where I'm like, when it comes, and I'll make a video when it happens. So whenever I just get in that mode, I'll sit down on my computer, maybe do a little bit of researching, talking it through with my friends, my boyfriend, my family, and getting their perspectives on it. And then after that, I go into research, script writing, my favorite app ever, CapCut. I use that like as my teleprompter, and I get set up, and then I just, read. And at this point, I think script writing has been really helpful for me, just to feel a little bit more confident in my work. But it's not even like a necessity for me at this point, just because I have been doing it for so long. But then I record and I post, and that's yeah, like my process and kind of how it's evolved.
How long have you been doing this?
I would say, it's so hard to like just encapsulate it. I probably started TikTok like 3 years ago.
You kind of named this like script writing process. Like, again, we're thinking about some of the creators who might not even know that they're creators just yet. Like, where did you learn kind of the script writing process, or was it kind of like, I'm going to try this thing, it worked? Like, I would love to get a little bit more into how you got to like, okay, this is my process, and like I've done this before.
For me, I always wanted to do journalism. So I think the script writing, the writing, I had a love for just writing in general in English and the English language. So that definitely helped propel me to be a little bit more confident in like using scripts and just papers and research and all of those things. But it's definitely evolved now. That's like super personal and a little bit more fast paced for me. But being in front of the camera was something that I got as a result of journalism. I did debate a little bit like in high school, so I could even credit some of it to that. So just little things here and there that I think put me in a good position to, call myself a content creator. But obviously, everyone's journey is different, and you could talk about educational things not even on a camera. You could be doing videos where your face isn't even showing. You could be doing it without words and just graphics. Like, there's just so many different takes that you can do. So that's why I just don't want people also to feel limited, to think that they're not qualified to be a content creator. There's old people out there, that have no idea how to use their phones, but yet they're still making content. So it can look different for everyone.
So to get on the other side of this, which is kind of what you named earlier, was just like the money piece. I think oftentimes we're not thinking about the money piece, but there's a way to both be doing purpose and also make sure you can have some food on the table. So I'm curious on, thinking again around folks who want to be doing this work, or are doing this work, how you're making a living, both being able to do advocacy and really doing content creation.
Yeah. So as a lot of people know, there's not a lot of money in the nonprofit, the advocacy space, just education space. I mean, in every aspect, we look at like nonprofits who are trying to advocate and they don't have a lot of money. We look at schools and they're trying to educate. So there's just not a lot of money, like socially, it's not normal for there to be a lot of money in those spaces. And for me, I had to start posting hair care videos, finding something separated from advocacy and education in order to fund basically what I'm doing. And honestly, I wouldn't even say that it was purposefully that I started doing that. I think having lifestyle content opened up maybe the fact that I'm a little bit more palatable to brands now, and I can do hair care, I can do couples content, I can do random stuff to make money. And I think when you get that platform, you know, that's what brands want. They want engagement, they want views. So if you start to build that platform and broaden yourself out a little bit, I think, you know, you can get some of those opportunities to come naturally. But obviously, I think it's a little bit sad that I can't create educational videos and that be the sole thing that I'm supported by, you know. And I think I'd love to see a future where I could just do that, because personally for me, although I do enjoy doing video creation, I wouldn't say that I specifically enjoy doing it for hair care or skin care or anything like that. And so whenever I do post those videos, in the back of my head, I'm like, I hope my viewers just know, like, I just got to get the bag, you know, like this, don't let this take away from the messaging or anything like that. But like, I'm just trying to get my bag. And usually there's people that are commenting like, oh, like, get your money. Like they know what's going on. And I do think it's a little weird that if we all know what's going on and we all know that, you know, a lot of people have to go outside of their comfort zone in order to make money. I wish there was a way that, you know, we could bridge that gap and, you know, create something so that we can be educators and content creators and activists while having it be a sustainable career, you know? So I envision that being something of the future. Not something I'm experiencing now, though, if I can be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's also just, you know, power in that of like, there's folks who, we all got to do something else to fund this. Like this operation is kind of a self-funded project, and it's doing some of the things that I low-key don't want to be doing all the time.
Yeah.
So I think that's the reality of doing this work. And so I think that's another piece of this puzzle that I think is so important to
And I
consider.
think even just that, I always think about the conversation of like, what, you know, privilege am I benefiting from by, you know, being someone who is lighter skin? Would there be a dark skin content creator making the same stuff as me? Would they be able to, you know, sustain themselves through brand deals about hair care and skin care and things like that? So it even gets into that conversation of is everybody able to benefit and, you know, use the same path? And I think there's a lot of like unfair standards in the beauty industry that other creators wouldn't be able to sustain themselves using. So just a lot of nuance in that. And I think, you know, the overall solution is just, you know, pay people fairly for the work that they do and value work in activism and social justice and advocacy and all of that. I think that's the solution.
Yeah.
So
Curious, when you think about like the future of you and your platform, what's next that you're thinking about as you continue?
yeah, next for me, I think I've always wanted to have a nonprofit of my own, or to some extent, you know, creating a business that can help the people that I'm trying to engage with and trying to talk to. I think there is, you know, a lot of power in me just showing up and me being here and me being a form of representation for a lot of queer people of color. But also behind that, you have to have resources, you have to have funding, you have to have money being poured into research, activism, all of these things. I understand that there's also a need for, and the change that I'm making is only one aspect of that. So I would love to address, you know, the inequities that we as queer people of color face in different ways. And I think, you know, having a business of some sort or continuing to just build my platform is what I envision. But just want to reach queer people of color and queer people in general and Black people in general in a way that's a little bit more direct.
What would your advice be to some of the advocacy groups who may not fully understand what is happening on TikTok, that there's people and there's content, like there's a lot of confusion. So I'm curious for those folks who are on the fence of like, should I as an advocacy group be using TikTok? Like, what would you say to them around really pushing play on content?
Yeah, I think number one, young people are like where it's at, you know. We understand the technology that we're using. We understand the algorithms, the trends, all of those things. And I think if we're prioritizing as a nonprofit, as an advocacy organization, as anything, you know, you want to get your messaging across. You want to get whatever you're offering, whether that be support or funding, you want to get that across to, you know, a larger demographic of people. And giving that to the young people, to those content creators, utilizing them, I think is the best thing that we can do. And it is a mutual relationship, you know. There's a lot of content creators out there that are doing advocacy work that want to be reached out to, you know, and they want those opportunities to represent nonprofits and advocacy organizations, and they want to be put to work, you know. We're in this because it's empowering, and we're in this because we want to make change. It doesn't matter who that change is coming from, you know. We want to be a part of it. And I think there's a way to utilize content creators that is kind of like an untapped market. And the experiences that I have had working with different organizations, they've all been like really, you know, pleasant interactions, and I've enjoyed it. And that's what is most authentic to me, and that's what feels most true to me, is having everything I do surround that type of work. And I'd prefer that if there was more opportunities like that, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the role of a content creator can be similar to a translator. You're kind of translating all of the great nonprofit advocacy work into the kind of the everyday person's language. And there's such beauty in that I think there's a lot of opportunity, to your point on that. Thinking beyond just like views and follows, like what is your metric of success? How do you know it's like, okay, this has been my platform is thriving? When, like, what is your definition of success for your platform?
Okay, this one is going to sound so cliche, but it genuinely is like the little messages that I get. I think I'm shocked whenever I go through like just my requests and my messages and just see the people who have literally said that they came out because of my account, or people who have said that they like have, you know, completely turned around from mental health struggles, seeing like me and seeing like representation. And it really does come down to the fact that like views, they tend not to matter whenever you get those messages or those people that are just resonating with your content, which is why I always encourage people. I'm like, please give me your life stories, because that's what like empowered me at one point, and it still does, to hear other people's stories. I hear a lot of stories from people that are like internationally who can't even be out, and they're telling me that they like watch my videos and that they're empowered by them. And just all of those interactions, I think are really a good way of showing that, you know, it's success. And like I said, it does sound cliche, but it doesn't matter if you make one impact for one person, you know, that's like almost enough for me. So that's definitely how I measure my success. And there's been couple instances where I've like seen people, you know, just on the side of the road, and they'll say something and I'm like, oh, like celebrity moment, which is very rare of an occasion. But even that, I think that's just getting to talk to people and, you know, see them one-on-one and see them not as just like a number that's on the right above the following, like having those interactions, I think, is how I measure my success.
You are going back to school super soon.
Yes.
So I kind of want to just hear more about the journey of being out of school, take some gap year, gap time.
Yeah.
So tell us about kind of why you're arriving back at like going to school, and like what that will bring in this next iteration of your life.
Yeah, I think being early on my content creator journey, managing something that I wanted to do so passionately and consistently while also doing school was a little bit hard for me. So I took a gap year, moved to a bigger city, got involved in some nonprofits, felt like, you know, it was just growing myself and my mind and just experiencing, you know, queer culture, being in like a neighborhood and all of those things. I was just like dried out of ideas, and I genuinely was like, I need this experience. And I think I got that experience. And I'm going back to school in Chicago this upcoming year, and I'm really excited about it. And my reasoning for that is do think that, I have a responsibility to come to my platform and give, factual, truthful information. And while I do have a lifestyle section of my TikTok and my account, there's an educational sense of that. And I want to be the best provider of that information. I think getting a degree is going to help me in that. And the degree is all for the TikTok, though. If I'm being honest, I just I want to better inform people. I want to better educate people. And I just want to be a better content creator, honestly. And it's been hard to find that in a college setting. I don't think a lot of colleges are even adjusted to just the importance of content creation and social media and understanding strategy and everything that can go behind that. But I found what I could, and I'm going to try to make it work for me. And hopefully my TikTok will benefit as a result of, some higher education. So.
Awesome. All right. So last question. So we're two Black queer men sitting here having a conversation, both who are creative activists. So I want to end with talking to the little versions of ourselves.
Yeah.
What would you say to little Kymon about where you are now and where you're going?
Shoot, that's a good one. Little Kymon. I think I tell a smaller version of myself or an earlier version of myself or anyone else who's out there in a similar position as me, just that, there is other people out there that are like you. I think growing up, specifically in the Midwest for me, created such a barrier to the world. And I was living in a bubble of just not knowing if there was even other queer people of color out there, not knowing if other people were experiencing anything similarly to me, and just hold out for those experiences, being intentional about the community around you and surrounding yourself around other queer people of color is one of the most empowering things that you can do for yourself and for your own journey. And not everyone has access to do that, but I would tell myself that, it's going to come at some point, and just to hold in there and stay strong,
Yeah, love that. I would say something similar. I think I would really say that you created a video for Amplify Pledge recently where you kind of mentioned how your very existence is in protest, and I think that is exactly what I'm always thinking about, is that every space I'm going into is a form of revolution. Is every space that I go into is a revolutionary act. So I would say it's the same thing, to keep going.
And even to add on to just that messaging about, everything that we do is revolutionary, everything that we do is noticed in a sense, and everything that we do is different. We're trendsetters, all of those things, and taking some of the pressure off of all of those responsibilities by taking care of yourself is something that I would also, mention to probably both of our younger selves, is just the importance of being there for yourself, the importance of knowing that you have a right to experience living joyfully like every single other person, and being intentional about, finding that joy for yourself, especially whenever it feels sometimes like the world is against you. Creating your own sense of joy, I think, is important, and it's necessary to sustain the work that we're both doing,
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us,
Of course.
Kymon.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for watching this Crave for Change conversation. Be sure to subscribe to Crave for Change and visit us at craveforchange.com.